It's finally here. After years of delays, leaks and false starts, Google's got a smartwatch. Many have wondered just how Google would shake up the wearable world with its debut. Maybe by bringing smart new features that work in the background to make your life a little easier, or an incredible fitness suite powered by Fitbit. While the Pixel Watch isn't the game-changing, industry-shaking device that many, perhaps foolishly, hoped it would be, it's a pretty good start from a company that's never made their own smartwatch. It's a slightly overpriced and fairly limited device, saved by beautiful design and solid foundations. But despite all that, I can't help but love the Google Pixel Watch. Let's start with the basics. The Pixel Watch is a small, sleek smartwatch that takes the best elements of both Apple and Samsung's designs to create a beautiful device. It's the first device since the original Apple Watch where I feel like the designers really let me look past the software flaws. It's pretty small as far as smartwatches go, especially for someone like me that's used to the massive 45mm Apple Watch. I mean, just look at the difference. In Apple Watch fashion, the Pixel Watch uses proprietary bands that have Google's own special connector. It gives it all a super seamless look, but it means that you'll have to be careful shopping for bands. The mechanism for changing bands is pretty simple, but it's super hard to show on camera. Like Google says, it sort of works like changing a camera lens. Like pretty much every Wear OS device, it's a circle. But unlike some, it features the same sort of digital crown found on the Apple Watch. I'm glad Google opted for a physical input method instead of something less reliable and just not as fun to fiddle with, like a touch bezel from the Galaxy Watch 5. The crown is actually one area where Google has beaten Apple's efforts. It sticks out a little further from the body of the watch, so it's much easier to spin and press. There's also a recent apps button tucked away at the top, but it's weirdly out of the way and harder to press than I would have liked. Not that I've been using it too often anyway, since there are nowhere near as many times when I felt the need to multitask on the watch compared to the Apple Watch, since there aren't as many apps that I want to spend a bunch of time in on Wear OS. Navigating the watch is pretty simple. A swipe to the left or right shows your tile widgets, a swipe up shows your notifications, and a swipe down shows your controls. This is all fairly standard smartwatch fare, and the new version of Wear OS that ships with the Pixel Watch is easy to understand and simple to use, almost to a fault. Many have said this already, but Wear OS 3 is pretty bare bones. Compare it to what runs on Samsung and Apple's watches, and it feels like it doesn't have any personality of its own. It's smooth and easy to use, but it's pretty boring at the same time. The lack of personality is really confusing when you consider that Google also makes the Pixel phones, and their Android 13 with Material U is probably the most visually distinct and interesting version of Android in the Western market. The Pixel phone's dynamic colours, fun animations, and other interesting visual touches are basically gone on the Pixel Watch. Luckily, while Wear OS itself is pretty boring, the Pixel Watch's faces are far from that. They're some of the most interesting and visually distinctive faces I've seen on a Wear OS watch. They all fit into the same style while looking unique. While Wear OS 3 is a well-made piece of software that's easy to use and understand, it feels like a reference design, something that other manufacturers like Samsung are supposed to put their own software spin over the top, making it look like One UI or something completely different. But aside from the faces, it doesn't really feel like Google's done any of their own customization to Wear OS, leaving it looking pretty plain and not really fitting in with the Pixel portfolio they've been going on about so much recently. There is one more element of the Pixel Watch that really stands out when you compare it to other smartwatches, but I feel that we should change this leather strap out before we cover it. It's the Fitbit app. When Google purchased Fitbit in 2019, they promised that someday we'd see Fitbit coming to Wear OS in some form or another. And with the release of the Pixel Watch, we finally know what that looks like. And for a first attempt at bringing the best parts of Fitbit to a proper smartwatch, I think Google's done a pretty good job. The first thing that the Fitbit app does really differently is that it records your heart rate once every single second of the day. The Apple Watch and Galaxy Watch do it every 5 minutes or so, but the Pixel Watch is firing that heart rate sensor all day, every day. The other big difference is that the Pixel Watch uses the Fitbit app instead of Google Fit to sync its health data. I don't really like the Fitbit app, as its layout's a little confusing and it doesn't use the new Google Material U design, but I understand why they've kept it around. For the millions of Fitbit customers that are already out there, a smartwatch that uses the app you're already used to makes a ton of sense. The Fitbit workout app on the watch itself is easy to understand and seems to match the Apple Watch when it comes to calorie estimates and distance tracking. The GPS tracking for workouts is also pretty reliable. I do like the way that the workout app lets you wait until the watch has a GPS lock before starting a workout, which is something that you can do on the ridiculously expensive Apple Watch Ultra, but not on the base level Apple Watch Series 8, which has always confused me. However, every Apple Watch does have support for way more metrics and little bits of interesting information than the Fitbit app offers. And while the usefulness of persistent elevation graphs or ground contact time for someone like me is questionable, it's a shame that Fitbit provides such a bare bones rundown of a workout. Luckily, the Pixel Watch's battery doesn't take too massive a hit from workouts, nor does the sleep tracking mode take too heavy of a toll. I only really used it a few times, but it seems fairly accurate and hasn't been making up any midnight sleepwalks that didn't happen like my Apple Watch occasionally would. And I'm happy to say that power hasn't been an issue like I had worried it would be. It easily lasts a day with the always on display enabled, and anytime it does run out, it's super quick to charge. This all sounds pretty good, and for a first attempt, it is. But a day of battery life and a so-so workout app can't really compete with the more fully featured offerings from the competitors. Pixel Watch is also more expensive than something like the Galaxy Watch 5, which offers a longer lasting battery life, bigger screen options, and a more robust health system for less. And it's a relief that the Apple Watch doesn't work on Android, because it absolutely trounces Google's efforts in basically every area except design. But despite all that, I'm in love with the Pixel Watch. It's got a beautiful design and fun faces that, to me, more than make up for a so-so software experience. But at a starting price of $339, it's hard to recommend the Pixel Watch to anyone other than a Google diehard or someone enamoured by this design, when the competition is so much cheaper and so much more advanced. Even if it's in a better state than the early Apple and Samsung offerings were, and it packs a killer fashion sense, the Pixel Watch is late to the party.